Chris Coleman case is a high-profile criminal investigation and trial that captivated the public's attention due to its shocking nature and the involvement of a prominent individual. Chris Coleman, a security chief for televangelist Joyce Meyer Ministries, was accused of murdering his wife, Sherry Coleman, and their two young sons, Garrett and Gavin, in their home in Columbia, Illinois, in May 2009. This report provides an overview of the key facts and developments in the case. Chris was born on the 20th of March, 1977, in the United States to Ron Coleman, father, and Connie Coleman, mother. His parents are co-pastors of the Grace Church in Chester, Illinois. So, church had always been at the core of Coleman's family. In the Marines, Chris Coleman was a dog handler. And it was at a canine training seminar where he met his future wife, Sherry Weiss. Sherry Weiss was an MP in the U.S. Air Force. Chris and Sherry drove up to Chicago one weekend and got married in 1997. There was a child already on the way, according to Chris's father, Ron. That was Garrett, and his little brother, Gavin, was not far behind. Chris had an important job that paid more than $100,000 a year as a bodyguard for world-famous Christian televangelist Joyce Meyer. Joyce is an old friend of the Colemans and had known Chris since he was a little boy. Meyer is well respected around the world, but there are some people who may not like televangelists and who turn their criticisms into condemnation. Chris Coleman claimed he too was the target of hate, telling relatives and law enforcement that he got chilling emails like one that reads, "Tell Joyce to stop preaching the bullshit, or Chris's family will die. I will kill them all as they sleep." And when one of those threats was allegedly stuffed into his mailbox outside the Coleman house, everyone began to worry. Sherry was extra frightened because that letter was delivered while Chris was traveling with Joyce Meyer in Hawaii. When he returned, he filed a police report. One email said, "Tell Chris his family is dead. They don't deserve to live with someone that protects the SOB Joyce." In another profanity-laced email, "Deny your God publicly or else. No more opportunities." And in the final chilling letter sent before the triple homicide, "This is my last warning. Your worst nightmare is about to happen." Justin Barlow lived across the street, a detective sergeant for the Columbia Police. He positioned the camera to focus on the Coleman's mailbox. Columbia cops also put on extra patrols, but they never saw anyone lurking around. The camera did capture images of Chris playing catch with Garrett and Gavin. On May 5th, 2009, it was 6:43 a.m. Chris was at the gym and said he couldn't get in touch with Sherry by phone. So he called Detective Barlow. His good neighbor from across the street, Chris asked him, can he go and check on Sherry and the kids? When Barlow entered the house for a welfare check, he saw a harrowing scene. 31-year-old Sherry Coleman and her sons, 11-year-old Garrett and 9-year-old Gavin, had been strangled to death in their beds. Sherry Coleman had 3 ligature marks that indicated that she fought, and fought hard, and also had a black eye. There was spray-painted walls that I looked at through a window that said, "Punished." There were other messages to the effect that, "You knew this was coming." This was a monster. Somebody who would spray paint the walls, spray paint one of the boys, strangle the kids while they slept. It was a monster, said KTVI reporter Chris Hayes. Chris is seen pulling into his driveway at 6:56 a.m., 15 seconds before the first officers arrived. One thing police said that they were very suspicious about is when they told Chris that his wife and 2 children were murdered. He never really asked how or what happened. The evidence indicates Chris did not make any attempt to go up those stairs, Chris Hayes tells Crime Watch Daily. Officers envisioned that they would have to restrain this man from going and seeing his dead family. They did not. He did not try to go upstairs. He did not ask, how were they killed? He sat somewhere on the front yard with his head in his hands. By the time I got up there, he was sitting outside on the driveway, and then they took him into an ambulance. I went in and sat with him, said Ron Coleman. It was a horrible morning. While Chris was in the ambulance, somebody noticed scratches on his arm, said Hayes. He looked at the scratches on his arm and started punching the gurney in the ambulance. The small police department calls in reinforcements from the state police and the FBI. The brutal and macabre nature of the crime had cops wondering, were they looking for a possible serial killer?
In the meantime, we want to get to some new information out of the state of Illinois as authorities there are hunting for a killer of a mother there and her 2 young boys. The husband of this group, Chris Coleman, told police he was at home on Monday night. He usually works at night for a ministry, and then he went to the gym early the next morning. And from there, he called police and asked them to check on his family because when he called, nobody had answered at his home. Right now, we're waiting for autopsy results on the mother you see there, Sherry Coleman, and her 2 boys. They were found, neighbors say they were strangled, found inside their home that morning. Nicholas Pister is a reporter for the St. Louis Post-Dispatch. He is on the phone with us now, and they've been breaking all sorts of details on this story. Nicholas, lay out this timeline for me, if you will, about what Coleman is telling authorities about where he was exactly on this morning.
Police have not laid out an exact timeline, but what we do know from high-ranking police sources is that Coleman said that he left the house about 5:30, and that's when he went to a St. Louis County gym. And then he had phoned police sometime before 7 o'clock asking them to check on the well-being of his family. And then the police then arrived, found the bodies. Coleman arrived shortly after police did.
And they have been questioning him continually? Have they given any indication if they think potentially he could be involved?
They questioned him for quite some time on Monday. He finally left after he had requested an attorney.
An indication to you at all whether they have a suspect at this point?
They continue to say there are no suspects, but they are following leads.
Nicholas, are they telling you anything about a motive? I know that this family, police have said they were enduring some threats in the neighborhood and to themselves in the past. There also was this message on the wall inside the house?
Yes, there was a message on the wall that had said, "I told you this would happen." But police have sort of not really been real upfront with the threats that have been made in the past.
Chris Coleman tells detectives when he left his house to go to the gym across the river, everyone was alive and well. Surveillance video shows him pulling out of the driveway at 5:43 a.m., but there's one huge hole in his story. His family was already dead when he left. Famed pathologist Dr. Michael Baden, former chief medical examiner for New York City, reviewed the autopsy reports and concluded the 3 Colemans were killed before 3 a.m., a few hours before Mr. Coleman left the home at 5:43 a.m. The camera pointed at the front of his house showed nothing the morning of the murders, said Hayes. And then Chris says his family is alive when he leaves at 5:45 a.m., yet officers who are touching the bodies say that they're cold and stiff. Many hours before Chris left, Dr. Baden says they died.
And you know what, for right now, I'm just going to have a seat there. I'm not sure what I want to do, but here's another water if you need it. Okay. I'll tell you what, from the beginning, let's just start up from when you got up this morning until the time you pulled up at the house. Just kind of walk me through that first, and then we'll go through and kind of explain, talk about some different things as far as the emails you've been getting, okay?
Well, I set my alarm clock for 5:30, and I used my phone for my alarm clock. And got up at 5:30, went in the bathroom, put these clothes here I got on, and went to the bathroom, basically got in the truck and left. And drove off. I got to I don't know where I was at, but called Sherry to wake her up, get her going, and she didn't answer, of course. And so I went on to the gym, to Gold's Gym, over by Ronnie's Plaza in South County, and started working out. I text her at some point. I might even called her again. I don't remember. I could probably look at my phone if you want me to.
Do you guys have a home phone number too, or just cell phones?
We just use cell phones. So I texted her, and then she still didn't respond, and probably now it had to have been well after 6 o'clock sometime when I texted her or called her. I'm sure it's still on her phone what time it was.
Okay.
And she didn't respond. It's not like her because the kids should have been up and stuff, or getting up and going by then, I believe. And so I called her again Called her again on the way back, or when I was getting ready to leave, and she didn't respond again, and started getting a little concerned because it's not like her not to answer the phone. Sometimes she won't answer if she's in the shower, but she always calls me back right away. And so she didn't do that at all. And so that's when I called you.
You were getting some of those emails sent to your work email address, right? Do you still have those on your computer?
I could look.
Okay.
They might be on the server.
Okay. Okay. That'd
I
be
doubt
helpful.
if they're on the computer because it deletes them after so
Kind of
long.
purges them out, type of
But
thing.
I would think they do on the server.
And how many threats like that? I mean, up until November, have you ever gotten threats like that before?
No, people have been upset with me, but I haven't gotten anything. I mean, I've had people yell at me and cuss at me and everything else, but, you know, and escort them off the property and all that stuff. If I just been there this morning, leave.
What we're gonna do, you know, Chris, we're gonna get past that. Okay, we're gonna work this out and get through it, all right? But what we need, the best thing you can do for us is help us. Try to fill it. You're doing a great job, man. But the best thing we can do is work together and try to figure all this out, okay? All right? And you're doing that. I mean, I'm not.
We've got, when you left the house this morning, was your wife alive?
Oh, yeah.
What would you say if I told you that I don't think she was?
I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, I think she was. I mean, she was.
Okay.
She was laying right beside me.
And I'm not doubting that. I'm not doubting that you were there, and I'm not doubting that you care. But I am doubting that she was alive when you left this morning. Physically, what we have are different ways to tell how long a person's been deceased. That was done. And what do you think that showed?
I don't know. I guess the time frame when I was gone. I mean,
No, you guys wrong. Chris, we need to get this resolved, okay? That you can't argue with physical evidence.
I'm not trying to argue with it.
All
I
right.
don't.
What I'm telling you is there is no other explanation. There's no other reason that the information we have would support what you're telling us. That it can't. It can't. You've told us a story and we've gone over it numerous times.
Right.
You know what? We walk out to Justin, maybe we missed this. Let's go in and talk to him about this and just make sure that we're not missing something. Let's give him every opportunity to tell us exactly what happened and maybe we're missing something. So
Right.
that's why we go out and we come back in and we go out and we come back in. I did have to use the restroom, that was legitimate, but we go out and we come back in. And we felt very comfortable that we were giving you every opportunity to tell us something that was going to contradict the information that we had. All right, we've got this information, you're saying it, and we're giving you opportunity to give us something contrary to what you told us before, so that, okay, yeah, all right, that would make sense. That hasn't happened.
I'm just telling you
that
what
hasn't
happened.
happened. Listen, man, she wasn't alive when you left. this
She
morning.
was alive.
No,
She
wasn't.
was. She was laying right beside
Listen
me.
to me. We can go back and forth with this all day long, but the physical evidence doesn't lie. She was not alive when you left this morning. The children weren't alive when you left this morning.
Yes, they were.
No, come on, Chris.
They
We gotta get over this. Now there's reasons, and that's the point we're at. I wanna hear the reasons. Now is when we need to find out what happened, man. It's so important. You're at a great point to be able to help us to try to figure this out. We already know what happened. We need to know why it happened.
I don't know
All right,
what to
listen.
tell you.
Listen, no, you do know what to tell us.
No, I don't.
Come on, Chris. She was not alive when you left. The children were not alive when you left. You know that's true, and I know that's true.
No, it just.
We need to clear this up now. We need to clear it up now. Did something happen? What happened?
Nothing happened.
What was going on in your life, Chris? Because I can't buy what you're saying. The physical evidence does not lie, Chris. It does not. She was not alive when you left, period. The physical evidence does not lie, man.
What do you want me to tell you?
The
I
truth,
don't.
the
But I'm
truth.
telling you the truth.
How did we get to this point? That's what I need to know. I need to know how and why we got to the point we're at right now. We both know you're not telling me the truth. We both know that. I've done this a long time. I'm looking into your eyes and I can tell you you're not being truthful, Chris. Chris. We need an answer. We need our answers. As bad as this sounds, as bad as this looks, or you may think it looks, we understand, and I've talked to many people who have given me reasons, and it's like, you know what, okay, all right, I can understand how somebody might have been feeling that at that time. And maybe they acted on it and they shouldn't have, and they regret it. There's no way to turn clocks back. You can't turn clocks back. You understand that, don't you?
Right.
You can't turn the clock back. The only thing we can do is go forward from this point, and we need to know what and why it happened. Come on, Chris, help me out with this.
I'm telling you, I've already told you. I've told everybody. I told the guy in the ambulance. I told you. I told him.
The more we go back like this, the more it makes me think that there maybe even isn't a good explanation for it. I mean, we need to know what happened. We can't keep going on this. It didn't, she was alive when I left. We know that's not true, and there's nothing we can do about changing that. If we know she wasn't alive when you left this morning, there's got to be an explanation. Now is the time to tell us. Now is the time to get this out of the open.
I don't know what else to tell you.
Yes, you do. Yes,
No.
you do. You have to tell me the truth, Chris.
I'm telling you the truth.
Were you involved in her death?
No.
Okay. Was someone you know involved in her death?
I don't know.
Did you know? Did you talk to anybody about arranging her death?
No, absolutely not.
Detectives kept asking why would someone make death threats against an unknown bodyguard. It was a question that puzzled detectives as they searched for digital crumbs that could link to the murder. They had so many detectives on this case, and they had a computer forensic expert who was tearing apart Chris' laptop, who found that these letters were generated on Chris' work laptop using his work login, said KTVI reporter Chris Hayes. Detectives also found out that the Colemans looked like a loving family from photographs, but friends gave an entirely different picture, said Hayes. Friends said that they were close to divorce. Cybercrime investigators discovered texts Sherry had sent to a friend. Sherry told her, "If something happens to me, Chris did it," said Hayes. In those texts, Sherry wrote, "Chris wants a divorce. He said me and my kids are in the way of his job. Marriage troubles aren't enough to make a murder charge stick." Then cops discover someone named Tara. Chris said they were just friends, but detectives found out that it was an affair with a promise to marry. Tara and Chris exchanged naughty selfies and videos of each other. But who is Tara? Well, Tara is Sherry's best friend from high school. Tara is a cocktail waitress at a poker room in St. Petersburg, Florida. When Chris Coleman was supposed to be guarding his boss, Joyce Meyer, in Hawaii, him and Tara are in his hotel room in Hawaii. As Chris Coleman is at the gravesite burying his family, he's texting Tara, "I miss you." On his computer, Chris Coleman had details about Tara, her measurement, her ring size, and the name of a baby that they would have. The name was going to be Zoe, said KTVI reporter Chris Hayes. He started sending himself threatening messages shortly after his affair with Tara began. He told Tara that he was serving Sherry with divorce papers on the very day Sherry and the boys were murdered. Columbia, Illinois cops asked St. Petersburg Police Major Shannon Halstead and her team to interview Tara just hours after the triple homicide. When I went to visit Tara at her condo, she answered the door and she was visibly upset. I knew right away, I had a gut instinct, that she was going to somehow be an important piece of this investigation, Major Halstead tells Crime Watch Daily. In the first of 3 interviews with police, Tara reveals that she had become possessive of her married lover. He always would take pictures when he's going to sleep to prove that, he wasn't sleeping with his wife or anything. But Tara had absolutely no involvement in the triple murders. She's only a witness. Chris Coleman was in a pressure cooker, said Major Shannon Halstead. He was getting pressure from Sherry Coleman. He was getting pressure from the ministry. And then ultimately, I think Tara was giving him ultimatums. Meanwhile, DNA testing came in from under Sherry's nails. It was consistent with Chris Coleman, but was not a definitive match. A detective had found that Chris Coleman commonly misspelled the word opportunities in his regular writing, and in one of the threat letters, opportunity is misspelled the same way, said KTVI reporter Chris Hayes. The handwriting of the messages was consisted with known writings from Chris Coleman, also according to a forensic handwriting specialist. The spray paint was determined to a specific brand and the color was candy apple red. Upon examining Chris's bank statements, they found a purchase from a small hardware store in St. Louis from a few months prior to the murders, and shocked authorities by confirming Chris had purchased a can of candy apple red spray paint. In May of 2009, Chris Coleman was arrested and charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder.
Thank you for coming tonight. As stated, we have some breaking news. We have made an arrest in the homicide of Sherry, Gavin, and Garrett Coleman. We have a Christopher Coleman in custody. He was charged late this evening with 3 counts of first-degree murder in the deaths of his wife and his 2 small children. I'd just first like to say that thanks go out to these men and women. This is just a small piece of this investigation. This breaking news, we got some information tonight that secured the warrant.
What changed between last week and this week?
I've been talking about how we were waiting on some forensic evidence, forensic testimony, different things, and it just all started coming together. And for several days now, we've been close. And it's just tonight there was some more evidence that came forward, and we were able to solidify just a more solid case. The prosecutor felt, as we did, that at this point there was enough time to charge him with this crime.
Soon after, Sherry's family filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Chris. This would prevent him from liquidating any assets, including selling the family home. Christopher Coleman went to trial at the end of April 2011. Prosecutors say he strangled his wife Sherry and their 2 young sons while they were asleep, and at the small-town courthouse the star witness arrives, the bodyguard's mistress, Tara. And the mistress wore a promise ring on the stand, said reporter Chris Hayes. Prosecutors introduced the steamy selfies and the X-rated videos to show Chris had the motive to kill so he could marry Tara. Prosecutors allege Chris Coleman killed his family because he feared he would lose his job as televangelist Joyce Meyer's bodyguard if he got a divorce. But then they played pre-taped testimony from Meyer.
We are on the video record. The time is approximately 2:57. I'm Counselor Rich Donner with Flash Legal Video. Our court reporter is Lynn Bartimus. Lynn, you may swear the witness.
Can you raise your right hand, please, ma'am? Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Would you state your name for the record, please?
Joyce Meyer.
And could you spell your last name for the record?
M-E-Y-E-R.
Did he have a company laptop computer?
Yes.
Did he carry it with him?
Yes.
Is this something that you saw with him when you made these trips, for example?
Yes.
He seemed to always have it with him?
Yeah, he carried his computer.
Okay. Did you ever see anybody else use that computer other than the defendant?
No.
Okay, May 6th, 2009. This is the day after Sherry and her sons were murdered. Did you speak to the police that day?
Yes.
When you talked to the police on that day, the day after this incident, were you aware whether or not this defendant was having an affair?
I wasn't in the beginning of the interview, but I was informed toward the end of the interview that he had confessed to having an affair.
But as you came into it that day, you didn't know?
I did not know.
Were you aware of whether or not he was having marital problems, though, between him and Sherry?
I did know that he and Sherry were having some marital problems.
How did you know that?
Well, she had called our office and talked to...
I'm gonna object as it calls for hearsay unless she spoke directly with this witness.
Okay. Did you speak with Sherry Coleman?
No.
Okay. How were you aware that they were having marital problems?
She talked to my son, Daniel.
Did you ever become aware of any threats that this defendant said he had received against himself or his family?
Yes, he told me about some.
The defendant personally told you that?
Yes.
What did he tell you? What threats did he report?
He told me that he had gotten an email threatening his family if he did not stop working for me. And then he told me that somebody started putting these threats in his mailbox, at which point I think he became more concerned about them since that meant somebody knew where he lived. He told me that they had taken the information to the police in Belleville and that he also had a detective that lived across the street from him and that they were going to make arrangements to put a camera there on his mailbox to see if they could see who was actually doing it.
Now, I have to ask you, if the defendant were having an affair, if you had known that at the time, and I understand you've testified that you didn't, what effect would that have had on his employment?
If he would have been having an adulterous affair while he was still married, then it could have definitely affected his job.
Okay. Were there persons over the years that were terminated in situations like that?
We had situations where they were, yes.
And in fact, he was married during the period of time that he worked for you, married to Sherry Coleman, correct?
Yes.
Were there other persons who had adulterous affairs while married whose employment was terminated at Joyce Meyer Ministry?
Yes.
For that reason?
Yes.
Okay. Now I have to ask you about the distinction here. What if it was a divorce as opposed to an adulterous affair?
Each situation is handled totally separately based on the circumstances. We have many people that work for us that have been divorced, and a person is not necessarily, do they lose their job because they get a divorce. It wouldn't have been the divorce so much as the immorality.
So for instance, if a person in your employment, if their spouse filed for divorce against them, and perhaps they had little control over that, you might leave them in your employment? That's a possibility?
Certainly.
Okay, and on the other end of the spectrum, if a person was having an adulterous affair and then filed for divorce from their spouse to be with that person, then their employment may have been terminated.
May have been, yes.
Okay. Do you think there was any situations of that in the past where someone was actually terminated under those kind of circumstances?
I believe so.
Okay.
The state says Chris emailed the threats from his own computer. He claims some mystery man hacked it, but Meyer discounted that too, saying she never saw anyone else use his computer. The jury came back and said, "Guilty, guilty, guilty," said Chris Hayes. And when word hits the streets, a large group of people outside the courthouse were cheering, despite the fact it was raining.
You could hear the crowd cheering as he was taken away. No doubt he could hear those folks, but he never looked up. His head remained down as he was taken back to the county jail until that sentencing phase begins. All around the courthouse, it was the same reaction from folks here. They were cheering one after the other. Some were exchanging high fives, clapping, taking pictures. Now here's how some of the people outside the courthouse reacted just moments after that verdict was read.
I think it is great. I think that justice has been served, and this is a long time coming, 2 years in the making, and I'm so glad that it's over and that Sherry got the verdict that she would want in this.
The judge sentenced Chris Coleman to 3 life terms without parole. Ron and Connie Coleman were never convinced of their son's guilt. In fact, they defended him at every turn. When faced with the fact that their son had an affair, Ron said she, Sherry, told Chris all the time that he was moody and he wasn't affectionate enough. She never did compliment him. That's why he was so attracted to Tara. He also reportedly told media outlets that Chris had an affair because Sherry failed to fulfill her wifely duties. As of 2023, all of Christopher Coleman's appeals have been denied. Chris Coleman will likely never be free. And the Chris Coleman case has left an indelible mark on our hearts and minds. It reminds us of the preciousness of life, the importance of justice, and the resilience of the human spirit. As we reflect on this tragic chapter, let us also remember Sherry, Garrett, and Gavin Coleman, and let their memory inspire us to cherish our loved ones, seek justice, and find hope in the darkest of times.